Hello. I'm Jon Reiss. I'm going to read something from my novel, which is new, which I usually am too afraid to do, so bear with me. If this were to be a short story, or if I were going to start naming my chapters, this one would be called Tits. Thank you. So, okay, this novel is about an aspiring actor named Simon who is a heroin addict, and to support his heroin habit while he's trying to become a famous actor, he strips via webcam in gay internet chat rooms. So this chapter takes place after he's just, for the first time, met one of his customers, and it didn't turn out so well. And the guy was like a real asshole and a sort of abusive guy, so he left, but he stole the guy's dog before he left. So he's now a heroin addict who wants to be an actor who has a pet bulldog that he doesn't know how to take care of. And he owes his drug dealer $80. And that's where we pick up. So, the dog's name is Fat. My life with Fat was a vast improvement over my pre-dog life. Right away I was using approximately 1 bag a day less, working more in my acting and feeling far less lonely. Carrying Fat in my arms as I walked him home from Caps's house, I had something of a holding your child in your arms for the first time catharsis, just less so. That day, I called almost every agent listed in the Ross Reports. The Ross Reports is a magazine that lists acting agents, including ones who wrote expressly in their listing, no calls. With each call, a secretary would either hang up as soon as they heard my desperate, aspiration-heavy voice, or they'd spit out an email address where all unsolicited headshots were to be sent. There's nothing like the word unsolicited to chop some hopeful's proverbial balls off mid-sentence. I made it about a third of the way through the Ross Reports to agents whose names began with E and connected to Mary Everill. She answered her own phone, but just like the secretary, she quickly spat out an email address where I could send my stupid, unsolicited face picture. I was about to hang up in defeat when she added, in her honk-nosed Brooklyn accent mid-sentence, "Go ahead and send it, I'm waiting." I didn't have Wi-Fi, so I jumped to my feet with the phone to my ear and the laptop in my hands. Fat jumped around, feeding on my energy, thinking it was time for a walk. Holding the computer and the phone while keeping Fat from running out the door, I raced outside, looking for a place with a free Wi-Fi network while trying to make small talk with the agent on the phone about the weather. Wearing only one sock, sweatpants, and no shirt, walking down the Brooklyn sidewalk with an open laptop and my chest hair blowing in the wind, I looked quite insane. Luckily, I found a nice Linksys Wi-Fi network emanating from a donut shop and managed to send out a photo. A moment of waiting for satellites to do their thing passed in silence. "Yeah, okay, I get it," Mary said. "You're like, not the cool guy, but not the nerd either." "Sure, yeah," I said. "Okay, not bad, I'll be in touch," she said, and hung up. I stood on the sidewalk confused, looked at the time, and then scrambled back to my apartment. I had to go meet Repo. The day beforehand, Repo gave me the ultimatum of paying back his $80 or giving him my laptop, which was hardly fair, but drug transactions tended to lack fairness. I ran back to my stoop, and Repo was there waiting for me as expected. I handed Repo the money, and he looked back at me with a somewhat solemn and accepting look. This surprised me. Repo may have been more animated than most drug dealers, but solemn generally wasn't something that registered on his face. "What's up, we good?" I asked him. Yeah, he said, and turned back down to walk down the stairs. I was almost back inside when he spoke up again. "Yo," he said. "What's up?" I said. "If I got a computer, would you show me Craigslist?" "I suppose, sure," I said. "My friend Lee Andrew fucked 60 women on Craigslist," he said, like he was presenting a fun fact, while smiling the most genuine and excited smile I'd seen maybe ever. I nodded back and shut the door, put off by the now broken personal boundary between us. About 15 minutes passed when my phone blinked with a text message and my stomach seethed at the possibility that it was Mary, that she'd already booked me for an audition. Instead, it was another message from Repo. I'd been interacting with Repo more than anyone else in my life, and I didn't even like him very much. Still, half naked in my apartment, I looked down at Fat, this new happy little stranger in my home, and I was thankful to have him there. Repo had texted, "Got a laptop, can you show me now?" Given that helping Repo held the potential of some kind of remuneration, I agreed to meet him at his apartment. It was a strange feeling walking through the walkway, heading to the project on Skull Street where Repo lived, knowing that I was doing nothing wrong. My movements as I made my way to the elevator became overwrought and showy, like I was starring in my own music video. Every resident looked at me as I waited for the elevator with far more peculiarity and suspicion than I'd ever received on my way to score. I walked into Repo's apartment, which was unassuming yet loaded with video and sport paraphernalia, and found him waiting for me on his leather couch with a brand new laptop open on a glass table in front of him, drug residue ever present in little mounds all over the glass. The first obstacle was the obvious fact that this laptop did not belong to Repo. So we needed to get past the login screen, which said, "Kristen's new pewter." Lucky guest number 120000 got us in, and Repo, like an excited adolescent opening presents, cheered for me to open up Craigslist, expecting, I imagine, penetration-addicted fembots to rise from the monitor and assume the position of his choice. The reality of the situation wasn't a far cry from that. Under the appropriate section, a plethora of subject lines popped up, all with the same intent. "Let's have fun, heart," "Looking for a playmate," "Stick it in my hole," hole is misspelled like the whole thing. Repo, in reaction to this virtual smorgasbord, slammed his palm into my back in a way that was supposed to be celebratory but hurt. Repo clicked away naked photos of women abound, some of them so beautiful I was actually jealous of his conquest. Repo wanted to reach out immediately. After stewing for a while as he waited for me to set him up with an email address, he sent out nearly 20 emails with pictures of his cock, which he'd somehow had the foresight to prepare via a PNG file on a thumb drive. Soon Repo became bored with the more vanilla ads. He started to only click on the ones whose headlines were beyond understanding. Ads that said things like, "Seeking ass combat," or "I want to be fucked by the ocean." I noticed two things during this session and kept them both to myself. A loose entry had gotten in the wrong section offering relaxation. Under it, Vikes, perks, and directions to the H train were listed as services offered. The ad came complete with a phone number and instructions to call, leave a name, a number, and wait for a call back. This seemed hard to believe, but I took down the number just in case. I also noticed that nearly every ad that Repo read and responded to included code language. They all stipulated the need to bring their suitor hundreds of roses or kisses if they wanted to meet. Thus, I came to the conclusion that all but maybe one or two of Repo's recipients were prostitutes, but I could not break this to him. He was as happy as I'd ever seen a drug dealer. So happy that when I left, he gave me 3 bags. I returned home and made food for Fat and I. I'd read somewhere that human food was junk food for dogs, so I made sure that the two of us ate meals together like family, and when he finished his little plastic tray of food, I gave him half of my sandwich for dessert. I spent part of my new fortune doing laundry for the first time in 4 months, but Fat immediately used my first pile of fresh laundry as a bed before I got a chance to put it away, and refused to rest elsewhere. Being a fan of fresh laundry smell myself, I could not blame or deprive him for this. Fat was snoring off a half-chicken sandwich, and I now decided this would be a good time to try dialing the new phone number I'd gotten off Craigslist. Almost as soon as I finished dialing, a voice mailbox beep sounded. I started to leave a message. "Hello, my name is... shit." I remembered that I was supposed to follow a certain protocol, so I hung up and called back. The beep sounded again. "My name is Saul. I want 1. Well, 10. By 1, I mean 10. Whole 1. Yes. Thanks. Bye." The prospect of this new computer-savvy drug dealer seemed promising, so I was nearly giddy when I saw his number light up my phone. "Yo, this Saul?" asked the voice of a man clearly trying to disguise his voice. "Yeah, this is Saul," I said, jealous that I hadn't had the foresight to come up with a fake voice. "Grand Street, right below Delancey, outside Kosar's, 1 hour. Can you get there by then?" "Sure thing." I was working on a character already. At this point, since I had never personally used the phrase "sure thing," I thought I'd give it a try. "If you don't show up, don't call again," he said, and hung up. For the next 30 minutes, I sat petting Fat, saying aloud my expectations for my encounter with the new drug dealer. I don't know, I guess it would just be nice to have someone I could meet every day who I didn't feel so intimidated by, you know? Someone I could trust, even, I don't know, talk with. You know what I mean? Repo is so, I don't know. You know what I mean. I looked down at Fat laying on my fresh pile of clothes and he looked up at me. He of course didn't speak, but the expression on his avuncular and angular dog face seemed so knowing. It was like Fat was telling me that there was something a little bit sad about the fact that my drug dealers have become the only people that I really saw each day, the people that I talked to the most. I ushered this thought out of my head with a quick shot before getting on the train to meet Craig, my new cyber dealer. On the J train, I decided that Saul was a sort of 21 going on 60 type, an old soul, with a voracious appetite for literary fiction in the plays of Augustin Strindberg. Saul was still too young to begin his career in academia, so he spent his days reading and writing a column for the local alt weekly under a pen name. Craig, if he proved himself to be quirky enough, could just end up a character in Saul's column. Walking out of the train at Delancey Street, I spotted Kosar's and immediately got a coffee, hoping this charming spot would become me and Craig's meeting place from now on. I sat on a bench outside Kosar's, watching each person that passed by, putting on the odds of whether or not they were Craig. I knew Craig was male from his voice, and he sounded on the young side, so that narrowed it down. There was a certain Caucasianness in his voice that was unmistakable, and when I saw a thin, pinkish-skinned man in his early 30s with bad posture and a pea coat, I placed almost certain odds that this was him. He stopped in front of me and waited there to see if I said anything. "Craig?" I said without thinking. "What?" he said. No, nothing. You got a light?" I said. Craig reached over with a lighter, looking a bit irritated to be doing so, though he looked somewhat irritated to be doing everything he did, like a man in constant anguish. From an aesthetic standpoint, Craig was not my ideal image of my badass cyber hacker dealer that I built him up to be, but people's appearances often changed according to their personalities. I smoked there for a moment as Craig looked around as if waiting for someone. Neither of us was willing to break the ice. We'd reached an impasse. Finally, I decided to try and tug the reins. "I like this place," I said. "Good place to meet." "You Saul?" he asked finally. "Yes," I exclaimed, standing. "Saul," I said, extending my hand for shaking. "You a cop?" he asked. "Most certainly not. Never even considered it as a profession," I said. "Okay, we're going to need to go somewhere so you can show me," he said. "Show you? What did you want me to show you? I left my I'm not a cop badge at home," I said with a giggle. "Your tits," he said. "Excuse me?" "Your chest. I need to see your bare chest so I know you're not a cop." I thought for a moment, feeling like I'd heard this before on TV maybe. "You know," I said, "I don't think that's actually a thing. I'm pretty sure cops can show you their chests." "Nah," he insisted, "it's true." "Okay," I said, "well, I can just Google it on my phone right now." I reached for my phone, quickly typing in, "Is it illegal for a cop to show you his..." "Show him or I'm out," he said in a stern tone. I started to feel like we were getting off on a bad foot, like this guy would never make it into Saul's alt weekly column. "Okay, I can just do it right here," I said. "It's no big deal," pulling up my shirt. "No," he said. He was starting to get exasperated with me, and I was starting to enjoy it, feeling like the stubborn old man character I imagined myself to be. I was really, at this point, getting into this Saul character. "Let's go, right around the corner," he said. "Okay, sure. Wait, you know what? There's no line inside. You mind if I grab a Bialy real quick first?" The temptation to say a little nosh bulged in my throat, but I resisted it. Craig looked as though he was going to implode with anger, so I offered him some incentive. "I can get one for you too. Cream cheese?" "Yeah, okay," he said. "Chive? I'm going chive." "Vegetable," he said, matter-of-factly. I walked out of Kosar's a moment later with 2 wrapped Bialys in hand and gave one over to Craig, saying, "Just out of the oven." Craig scarfed down the Bialy, and I began to piece together the puzzle that was him. Between the way he was inhaling the Bialy like food was not a high priority for him spending-wise and the obvious track marks on his wrists, it seemed he was a user, probably supplementing his habit by selling. His prices at $100 a bundle pointed to this as well, but it seemed worth it for a more casual and friendly buying experience, which I was still on the fence about whether this was. I felt like I had pretty much had Craig all figured out when he suddenly spoke up during our walk. I thought I noticed him staring at my ass area where I'd forgotten the Ross reports were hanging out of my back pocket. You got an agent? Craig asked. Working on it, I said, trying to sound positive. Good luck, he said with a harum-filled voice. All agents are fucking idiots. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of a decent direction in which to steer this conversation, so we were quiet for the next couple blocks down Orchard Street. When we arrived in front of a seemingly random residence on Orchard, Craig and I walked up the stoop. Craig did the old mash a bunch of buzzers trick to get inside. It worked, and we walked in a few feet. Craig, wiping off the residual crumbs from his hands on his pants, said, "Let me see him." I tried to be as comedic as possible as I lifted my buffalo check button-down shirt revealing my tits, and Craig just nodded, saying, "Okay, let's see the money." I whipped out the $100, which I'd gotten ready before leaving my apartment. "Okay," he said, "give it here." "Well, let me see the shit," I said, breaking character a little bit. Craig flashed a knowing and aggressive look before reaching into the waist of his jeans. "Here's the shit," he said. His hand rose from his pants, slowly revealing a .22 pistol. This was the second gun I'd seen in my life, and once again I was surprised by how much it looked like what I expected it to look like. There were no surprises. This time, though, I quickly reverted into a feeling of irritation that I was about to walk out of this experience without drugs, without a new connect, without a new friend. Fear really wasn't a factor. Craig didn't seem to have it in him. Besides, he wasn't even pointing the gun at me. That's when the frustration, disappointment, and irritation took the helm. "I bought you a fucking Bialy," I shouted. "I will shoot you in the brain." Now pointing the gun directly at my brain as promised. If this had all been one big character study, perhaps I'd done a rush job on Craig. Still, I doubted that he would squeeze the trigger. There was an obvious fear in the way he handled the gun, the way I might hold the gun if I had one, as if it could go off at any second. A noise came up from the stairs, and Craig quickly hid the gun behind him. An older woman, probably in her 60s, came walking down the steps with garbage bags in her hands. I thought about trying to barrel past them to the door, but it seemed too risky and relatively the stupidest way I could possibly die. "Good afternoon, Trevor," said the old woman, ambling down the steps with her garbage. "Afternoon, Miss B," Trevor said. A whole new person at this point, he was. Waiting for this woman to finish her voyage down the steps, I continued to think about this situation, whether Trevor would actually use the gun he was holding. I was quite sure he wouldn't, but decided to play it safe anyhow. I had a dog depending on me now, after all. Then I realized something. Why did this woman know that Craig's name was Trevor? This thought coalesced just as the woman finished walking through the door to the building. "You live here," I said, dumbfounded. No, I don't," he said. "Yeah, you do, liar." "No, I just have a friend who lives here, but he moved. Give me the fucking money before I shoot you." I looked at Craig, who was now holding the butt of the gun but not taking it out of his waistband, as Miss B would probably walk back inside as soon as she finished taking out her trash. For a brief second, I saw a mountain of futility like I'd never seen before. I needed to get something back in my life, something that wasn't just garbage. I took the cash from my pocket and slapped it into Craig's hand. "You're a dick," I said to him, and then walked past him out the door, smiling an irritated but pleasant enough smile to Miss B on the way out. Craig stayed inside, as clearly he lived there, and I headed for the J, grabbing a Metro card and a can of dog food with the last of the money I had on me. I was now sure that drugs and the internet did not mix. Walking home, it occurred to me very suddenly that the girl in the Craigslist ad probably wanted to get fucked near the ocean and not by the ocean itself. I emailed Mary Everett a nice note. "I'm looking forward to working with you," I said. "Thank you."